How do the market player confidence on the target set by the Indonesian government, Pasim?
Well, after a slump in 2020, we project 2% YOY negative growth. We expect Indonesia's GDP growth to turn positive at 4.2% in 2021. We are starting off from a very low base. So I think 4.5 growth set by the government would be a very reasonable projection for the market to accept and concede. However, the more important thing is how the government reaches the target growth and how they communicate with investors. Because, Indonesia is currently pushing big agendas to bolster the economic growth, such as the Omnibus Law, the Indonesian Sovereign Wealth Fund, to name a few. And I think market participants are already looking at 2021 with a very slightly positive sprinkle of optimism. So execution of these big agendas like Omnibus Law and the Sovereign Wealth Fund would be closely monitored by market participants. And managing expectations would be an important strategy for Indonesia's government. So again, to conclude, 4.5% growth itself is not a very big target per se, but how you reach that goal and how you manage expectations, communicate with the market participants, I think that's going to be a very important job for the government.
Okay, Pasim, again, we talk about the infrastructure sector is the focus of the government, Indonesian government, with a budget around 471 trillion rupiah. What is the impact on the performance companies in the infrastructure sector in Indonesia?
Well, our construction sector analyst, Joshua Michael, and our materials analyst, Mimi Haliman, are both excited about the significantly higher infrastructure budget in 2021. They both have overweight recommendations on the construction and cement sectors. And I think that's pretty much reasonable to kind of, reach an agreement. I think the government is sending out a very strong message that it is dedicated to developing Indonesia's weak infrastructure system. However, I think investors are likely to look at this aggressive infrastructure push with a slight grain of salt. There is a stark difference between what you want to do and what you can do, right? You want to develop Indonesia's, the government wants to develop Indonesia's infrastructure system, but can they do that? That's a very different set of questions. Over the years, I think infrastructure development has been Indonesia's key agenda for many, many years, right? However, I think investors are not fully satisfied with the results. They are, we have seen some very meaningful accomplishments, but I don't think that investors are fully satisfied with the results. I think there's still a lot to be done. The positive tone signaled from the government is already being reflected into the share price of contractors and related industries. So I think the most important part of this excitement is how the government is going to execute the infrastructure agenda. I think that's going to be a very, very important watch point for the market participants, and only time will tell whether the government is able to execute their plans.
Just want to know a little bit your opinions about in the previous years companies in the infrastructure sector, particularly the state-owned enterprises have struggled with negative cash flow, results of turnkey project. Can the new infrastructure fund allocation solve the problems? A little bit, just your opinion.
Again, I don't think that it's appropriate for me to actually, forecast whether the Sovereign Wealth Fund or the government's public budget will be able to solve a lot of these problems, because I think, infrastructure development and infrastructure, improving the infrastructure is not a very simple, task for any government, right? So while we are excited as investors and also market participants, I think it's not a very easy problem to crack.
Okay.
So I think I will have to, again, going back to the earlier statement, I think we will have to wait for the government to actually come up with some, viable execution plans and take it from there whether these plans are, reasonable or realistic going forward.
Okay. We back to the last issue regarding to the COVID-19. The government implement PPKM. So how does it impact on the company's performance in Indonesia?
So PPKM is the social restriction,
yes.
right? Because for the government, it needs to balance between growth and stability, right? As long as we are living with COVID-19, growth and stability cannot coexist.
Okay.
Simply, if we relax the social restrictions, then it's very natural for COVID-19 to spread like wildfire. On the other hand, if stiff social restrictions are in place, we can contain the spread of the virus by identifying the infected, isolating, and treating them.
Okay.
For now, I think the government has chosen to stick with stability, and I judge that to be a very prudent move. By imposing social restrictions, I think government will trade higher economic activities with social stability, and this will help economic growth and corporate earnings. This will keep economic growth and corporate earnings on a very tight leash. But while earnings recovery of corporate Indonesia will be pushed back further, it's important to highlight that the first job for the government and President of Indonesia is to protect the nation. So I think the re-implementation of social restriction is a very prudent move.